now that, the Bay Area where I grew up, Silicon Valley, where all technological innovation has happened over the last 40 years, is a graveyard for the church. Because there people believe in technology, they believe in science, they believe in the human mind more than they believe in God. But to me, technology is not too much different than the understanding of science or how things work, but is something that has already been in the mind of God, and now understood by us as sons and daughters of God. And if we don't truly understand tech, then we can't truly understand where the world is going. And so, whether it was the Gutenberg press more than a century ago that proliferated the expansion of the gospel around the world through technology, through a printing press, where we are now with the internet and the internet highway, is a whole new proliferation and manifestation and evangelization of the written word of God to be communicated to all countries, to all nations, to all tongues. With that being said, over the last decade, there's been a new wave of technology that is really positioned not only the gospel but humanity, meaning is affected by the gospel at every level of salvation to discipleship, all the way to purpose and nations being formed and called and saved. But with that being said, I want to just give you a quick understanding of why we're having this conversation and why at the prophetic roundtable this last November, when Mike had asked me to share, and Bishop Garlington and a few others, that I kind of just shared my own experience in the last few years when it came to my work in business. I'm a businessman now. I work daily with multiple companies in my media entertainment technology portfolio. I'm a venture capitalist. I invest in tech companies, as well as invest in media and entertainment companies. I've started 6 companies in the media entertainment space, mainly between Hollywood and Asia. But I want to get back into what we understand of what is now this keyword or buzzword, Web3 or the metaverse. And so what is this buzz? Why do you keep hearing about words like NFTs, metaverse, meta, blockchain, crypto, DeFi? What are all these buzzwords that are popping up in your feeds, in your social media? People are talking about it at the dinner table on Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you're going, to your niece or your nephew or your friend, like, what are you talking about? This sounds all like Greek to me. Let me break it down very simply. Web 1, which was the birth of the internet in the 90s, really helped us as humanity to understand the ability to process and access information. And so the word for Web 1 is read. It started with, a simple browser to Netscape. And then from there, you were able to have Yahoo, and from Yahoo to Google. And you could type in a word, any word, and you could read and get information that you are not able to access before through the push of a button. And so this opened up the internet age of mass communication and mass information at your fingertips through a browser, through a laptop, through a MacBook, through a computer, through your PC. And that was information where these internet giants, these tech giants, begin to really take over the industrial age. Up until that point, it was the Ford Motor Companies, it was the oil and gas companies, that the Exxons, the Chevrons, that really had the largest market caps in the world. But once people were able to get information, that became the dissemination of all new types of applications of business. So Web 1 was about read, and it was access to information that was not relatively available before, where you'd had to go to an actual physical library or go to school to actually get that information to be educated. Web 2 is what we call read and write. Read and write. And what does that mean? It was the application of that information and how to actually use it applicably and relevantly to our lives. Meaning, Now I could actually go to YouTube. I could actually go to Facebook. I could go to Instagram. I could go press a button and a car would come pick me up with an Uber or a Lyft. I could go and press a button and food would show up at my door. I would go and sign up on the internet for Netflix, and I could now see my favorite movie or my favorite TV series. And so what happened in Web 2 was what we call read and write, meaning we now have the ability to publish that information either as users or as consumers from these internet tech giants. And so in Web 2, you begin to see this promise of this free world, this free internet, where you're able to get all this information. And now everyone can be educated. Everyone can have access. Everyone can just turn on their phone or their computer and be able to be educated and to have data. And then from that, to apply that data and to build on top of that internet highway and to actually have access and to have real life impact. You can actually feel it, right? Web 2 was about read and write. What was the promise and what was the problem? The promise was, hey, there's this new decentralized network called the internet. Everyone can have access to information and education, and everyone can now be free. But instead, in Web 2, with read and write, it just formed new pyramids or new hierarchies or new systems of control. So in Web 2, all the value actually accrued only to a few internet tech giant companies, which we understand now as FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. These companies combined, we're talking about trillions, tens of trillions of dollars of value. And who are these new pharaohs? Well, they're called Mark Zuckerberg. They were called Tim Cook and Steve Jobs. They were called Jeff Bezos, the Elon Musk, et cetera, et cetera. And these new pharaohs controlled mass information and data, and they made masses of money till this day through advertising. And if some of you have watched this documentary on Netflix called Social Dilemma, it talks about how over the last 10 years, because of Web 2 and these tech giants, and because of this model of pushing content to you, monetizing and collecting your data, and then selling that to the advertisers, has created this mental illness, this downward spiral of what I call this selfie generation, right? Where now we're addicted to our phones. We're addicted to our screens. We're addicted to the time. We're addicted to, everything and every notification that we're getting. I remember back in the day when I didn't have a phone and all I had was a pager, and I was a brand new Christian. Anyone remember beepers and pagers? And remember you would text 143 means I love you, and I remember I used to actually have time to read books, and without distraction, right? I had time to pray and meditate without distractions. But now everything is fighting for your attention because of this Web 2 model of content, data, advertising, right? And because of that, we've now kind of become lemmings, right? Everyone is going to be, whether you like it or not, affected by these major tech giants. And who got all the value at the end of the day of Amazon? Who got all the value at the end of the day of Uber? Who got the value at the end of the day of Facebook or Netflix? Is not us, the ones who are actually consuming the content. It's unfortunately these new pharaohs. And so, end of the day, although it's helped some, right? I will have to say the sharing economy, whether it's Airbnb or Uber, has helped many, right? To be empowered and to earn a salary by driving a car or renting their home. But ultimately, we're still not free. And Web 3 is about one word. It's about own. It's about ownership. And Web 1 was read, Web 2 was read and write. Web 3 is about read, write, and own. And when we talk about ownership, we're talking about the ability to now own your data, own your own security, own your own IP, not have a middle layer or a middleman in between you and your ideas and your assets, your digital assets, as well as physical. And how's that made possible? Which I'll let Phil really explain when he gets his presentation ready here on the tech side. It's through the blockchain. And so a lot of us don't understand, or we hear about the blockchain, we hear about this technology, but we don't fully, truly understand what it is, right? And the blockchain really came through a unknown to this day, potentially made up figure by someone who's decided to stay anonymous, named Satoshi Nakamoto. And over about a decade ago, he wrote a white paper, what they call a white paper on Bitcoin. And he talked to, and this really was a reaction to the 2008 stock market crisis. And at that time, it was a reaction to the federal bank. It was a reaction to these centralized systems that controlled our governments, our economies, our technology, and our lives. And it was like, can we really trust these centralized systems of economies where it really is archaic? It goes through the hands of a few, and at the end of the day, there is no transparency. And so what Satoshi Nakamoto wrote was that there can be a digital currency that can be built on a ledger, which is a blockchain, and that because of this block and chains of blocks, we're able to see transparently through technology every interaction and every application and every action that happens on the internet. And this has happened through what they call consensus, where multiple people have to confirm that what was done was actually fact and true. It's almost no different than where Jesus says, where two or three gather in my name and ask anything, I'll be there. And where there's two or three witnesses, consensus is the ability for not just one federal bank or one person in power or a few to say, hey, this is what is true and transparent for all, because it isn't, versus within the blockchain, everyone can see what just happened and it's recorded on the block. And that block then creates a chain of blocks, right? Which then creates this network effect where everyone can see that you actually own this piece of data. You actually own this digital asset. And so when that came along, Ethereum, another technology created by Vitalik, who's alive and well today, which is the most well-known, I would say there's Bitcoin and there's Ethereum is what you normally buy in the cryptocurrencies. If you download Coinbase and you watch the Super Bowl and you see, I don't know if you guys watched the Super Bowl this year, but you know, half the commercials were about crypto. If you saw recently this last year, Staples Center in LA is now no longer Staples Center, it's Crypto Arena, crypto.com arena. If you go to, Miami, it's now called FTX Arena, which is one of the largest crypto exchanges. My point in all saying this, guys, is that Ethereum created a smart contract. That smart contract allows anybody to transact without a Facebook, without a bank, without a centralized government, where now anyone can contract directly with each other and through the computer be able to be direct and basically be the master of your own destiny. And what I mean by that is not that we don't have Christ as our Lord and Savior, but now we're no longer controlled by a Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, or Google. No longer do they accrue the value or a centralized government or place or organization, but we now can own our own value and own our own assets. With all that being said, I want to introduce my friend Phil Chen, who is the one that really taught me all this about 10 years ago. Phil, if you don't know who he is, he's calling out of Taiwan tonight or and our morning. So good night, good morning, good evening, good morning. Phil is my best friend in the world. He sat on two of my boards of two of the companies I started. He's also a Fuller Theological Seminarian. We both went to Fuller Theological Seminary. Phil was a missionary in Afghanistan about 20 years ago. And while he was there, he wanted to give every child education because they didn't have access to a library. They didn't have access to books. And so he said, being a technologist, his family started a company called HTC, which is the company that created the first Android Google smartphone. And he created a ebook, the first ebook in the world. And it was to give education or a library to every kid in Afghanistan. And that ebook, and he ended up selling to Barnes and Noble. and became the first electronic book in the world called the Nook, N-O-O-K. If you guys remember that, almost two decades ago. You now know the Kindle. With that, before the Kindle, there was the Nook. From there, he went on to work at HTC, leading their investments, and most recently started around 2014, created the first competitor, I would say one of the first VR headsets. Some of you guys know Oculus, but what has been ranked above Oculus from Facebook is HTC Vive, V-I-V-E, which means life. And he created one of the first virtual reality headsets in the world, which is still the top enterprise headset and top 2 headsets in the world today. You heard Facebook being called now Meta, which means XR, meaning virtual reality, augmented reality. Phil created the virtual reality headset, HTC Vive, which is well respected around the world and ranked #1 for 5+ years. After that, Phil invented another invention, which is now called the HTC Exodus, inspired by Moses, and he'll explain why, of being freed from these pyramid organizations. And that was called the first and still is the first crypto hardware phone. On your phone, you're able to actually protect all your assets. With that being said, now Phil now runs one of the top crypto venture capital funds in the world, called Race Capital, RACE, and major investors in some of the top blockchains in the planet. But at the same time, he's one of the brightest minds, one of the most brilliant minds, and one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met in my life. It's going to be a treat for the next hour for you to truly understand Web1, Web2, Web3, what is the metaverse and Web3 from a messianic perspective. Everyone give it up for Phil Chen.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yep, we're good.
Yeah, sorry, I had some technical difficulty with the presentation, but so it's going to be controlled remotely. Yeah, I titled this talk, I'll talk for maybe 30 minutes, hopefully less, and then we'll move on to questions. I think Jason touched upon most of the topics I'm going to talk about. And I titled this talk, The Technology of Good and Evil. And just to say that it's a perspective about how technology is so powerful, right? And technology is such a big impetus in the movement of history, and we're going to talk about soft technologies mostly, and I consider language or writing a technology, the invention of money as a technology, and of course, software and the internet. And then the thing I want to conclude and kind of really communicate to everybody is this whole idea of the metaverse and Web3 and Bitcoin. It's because of the rise of this whole secular movement. It's becoming it's nothing short of a religion, and that's what I really want to get to. So can you go to the previous page? And so I want to start with this image, and this image is a person rowing a boat, right? And this is my perspective of myself as as an investor, as somebody that invests in innovation in the future, right? I started investing in, what's called the metaverse now, 2013 and 14. I started to invest in Web3, what people call Web3 now, which is, another name for cryptocurrencies or crypto assets in, 2016 and 17. But I wouldn't call myself somebody who knows the future, right? And I wanted to share this image because I see myself in this burning boat, right? And my back is facing towards the future, and I don't see the future. I'm rowing into the future, right? And guys like myself, and I think we'll hear from Connie and Jason and Jiwa, when we invest into entrepreneurs, we give them capital, and these entrepreneurs help us figure out what's going on, in the market or in the economy or, in social movements, right? And so I don't claim to be prophetic in that sense. It's really innovating or figuring things out of necessity. And so next page. This next page is kind of the stuff that I've done before, right? I think Jason mentioned FTX. We were seed investors of that. Some of the things that I worked on before, the Vive headset, the Exodus phone on the bottom right. It was the first and still the only so-called blockchain phone. In the middle to the right, you see this Facebook phone. And these are some of the companies that I invested in that got acquired. I have companies that got acquired by Epic, by Roblox, by Discord, by Niantic. These are like core metaverse companies. Obviously, Bitcoin, Ethereum, FTX, these are like core Web3 companies. Next page. And the next page really is, it's these three technologies, right? I think, you may think of electricity as a technology, or, the industrial age, like the steam machine, the steam engine. But really, there are only three sort of soft technologies, right? The first one to the left is language. Of course, that includes writing. In the middle, it's money. I think I really had to think deeply about Bitcoin and understand what Bitcoin was and what it meant about money. And money really is a technology, is an innovation, right? It's this conversation between a creditor and a debtor. We'll talk a little bit about that. And on the right is software, right? Which is where we're in this thing called the information age. We'll talk about the internet, social media, and things that are so influential in our lives today. Next page. And I want to start off by this idea that I got from, he's a rabbi, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And he talks about how every revolution, every kind of religious revolution has been accompanied by the revolution in information technology, right? The next page. And these technologies that he talked about, like, we're not going to go through everything, but just an example is like, you may know, like, the alphabet was invented in the Middle East. That garnered the birth of Judaism, right? And Christianity coincided with the birth of codexes, right? The early Christians invented the codex, meaning, you couldn't, because in the Old Testament, they were written in scrolls, right? And the early Christians were with the four Gospels, and of course later Paul with the epistles. They needed to bound these books together and invented the codex, and that started the spread of Christianity. And then, as Jason mentioned, the Gutenberg press, right? The Gutenberg press, of course, was key, or the fundamental technology that started the spread of the Protestant revolution. And now we're in this. Next page, please. Now we're in this this age. We go, it's called the information age. And this image just kind of shows like how every piece of our world is being turned into software, is being turned into data, right? And what I'll get into is a few of these companies were in reality more powerful than many countries, or owns all of this data, right? But Uh, the story I want to tell, starts from there, but I really the kind of the key idea around all of this is Bitcoin. Um, Next page, please. Bitcoin is uh, this idea. It's at least both software and money, right? Of the three kind of big uh, key soft technology. And why is Bitcoin so disruptive and different, right? I think understanding Bitcoin will help inform what we want to understand today is what the metaverse and what Web3 is, right? I think once you understand Bitcoin, it helps, and I think it really is the key thing to understand if you want to understand what the metaverse and what the what Web3 is. And of course, I want to get into. I'm going to end with why Bitcoin is really a religion. It's a way of life to many, and why this and all these in these Web3 communities, they're really new belief systems. They're they're really mission-based communities. When you spend time on a Discord today, you can see that these people are longing for community. Uh, they find meaning in these Discord communities, right? And so, I'll start out with defining. Next page, please. Next one again. These are just things I'll explain. Even Bitcoin is this is one of the probably the number one kind of expert on the Bitcoin. Uh, he calls the book is called the Bitcoin Standard, and he calls uh, the writing or the dropping of this Bitcoin white paper. He calls it the Immaculate Conception, and you can start to see people in this space use this type of language. Um, whether it's in the Web3 community or the Bitcoin or the Ethereum community, they really are using philosophical language, religious language, and myth building languages to build like this meta narrative about how Bitcoin started, right? And Bitcoin is so influential because, Satoshi is this, nobody knows who's this person or this group is, right? And this is their origin story. This is their immaculate conception, right? Next page. And later we'll get into what the comparison between the Bitcoin, what people call the Bitcoin Reformation. We'll talk about this idea of the separation of state and money, because the people in the Bitcoin space compare it to the Gutenberg Revolution with the separation of church and state. Um, so I'm going to start with quick definitions of what the metaverse and what Web3 is. Okay, next page, please. And the metaverse, as Mark Zuckerberg defines it, simply is really just the internet plus. The metaverse is really the internet, but the way he defines it is internet plus, presence, which is a more kind of immersive experience. It's the internet plus persistence. Persistence means like, a game like Fortnite, when you log in and you play with these other people, and then when you log off, that virtual world continues, it persists. That game doesn't end, so to speak, right? Hence the idea of, a double life, you know, a life that exists beyond your physical life, right? The internet also plus the metaverse also means the internet plus VR, AR, virtual reality, augmented reality, and then we'll also talk about the internet plus Web3 intersection, right? But if it's just a short, quick definition of what you want to call the metaverse, it really is just the internet plus. It's the internet plus, these other things. So it really is the internet. And the next page. These are examples of the metaverse. On the right side, it's Roblox. Roblox is um, is a game. They have, I think, over 60 million users. These are games played by 12-year-olds and under. And this is an example of, a virtual game that is persistent. And I'm sure many of your children play this game too. Next page. Next page is an example of a LeBron James Fortnite skin. If you ask today, anybody under 16 years old, 15, 14, and you ask them, what do you want for Christmas, right? Do you want, I don't know, a Supreme sweater? Do you want Nike Air Jordans? Anybody under 16 will say, no, I want, this LeBron James Fortnite skin, or I want this this other kind of virtual asset, right? Next page. And they'll say, I want this, Bored Ape Yacht Club or CryptoPunk, right? And they don't, and then even kind of the Bitcoin space, these are people 20 to 35. They no longer want Rolex watches. They don't want Panerai watches. They want these exclusive, Bored Ape Yacht Club images, right? These are what people call NFTs now, right? And so this is what really the metaverse and what Web3 is, right? These are the web metaverse is Internet Plus, and Web3 is this idea that Jason mentioned. See the next page. Is this idea of a digital asset, right? I think Jason was just mentioning Web 1 being read only, Web 2 read and write. And so Web 2 companies are the companies we all know. Like in the West, it's Google, Amazon, Facebook, it's Microsoft, it's Apple. In China, it's, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and together, these 7, 8, 9 companies own basically the world's data, right? Next page, please. And this is really one of the key things to understand. This, what is a digital asset, right? Why does Web3 make such a big deal about ownership of data, right? And in this slide really, I think, communicates the significance, right? I think what really defined the agricultural revolution was the definition of real estate property, right? And when we talk about real estate property, we talk about ownership, or like we own real estate. I mean, this is the reason why Bitcoin and conversations like this becomes very political and also religious, is because the definition of real estate property is basically how your government decides to regulate that, decides if you're a capitalist or if you're a communist, right? And the same with how you deal and regulate and protect intellectual property, right? The thing that defined the Industrial Revolution is the definition of intellectual property, right? And now, fast forward to now, we're in this far into the information age, right? And we're just only beginning to define what digital property is, right? And Bitcoin is a digital asset, right? Things like Ethereum's a digital cryptocurrency, right? And NFTs are basically non-fungible digital property, right? And so I think this slide really communicates how significant really this concept of a digital property and who owns this digital property, right? The thing about the previous slide is in the Web 2 space, all the companies. Next page, please. Let me talk about the next page first before we go to here. these 7 companies that we just mentioned, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, they basically own, everybody's, there's no such thing as digital property because these 7 companies own everybody's data, right? Google, for example, they know what everybody is searching for, right? There's a book titled "Everybody Lies," and the book basically says that um, like human beings they're most honest and most vulnerable on Google. The things you don't tell your friends, the things you don't tell your spouse, you tell Google, right? You search for it, right? And Google knows everything, right? Because when you search for these most personal things on Google, um, Google then logs what you're searching for, right? Apple, because everybody has an iPhone, it knows where you are. It knows all your location. Whenever you type, everything that you type on the software keyboard uh, is logged and can be logged, right? So it knows every single thing that you're typing. Facebook, uh, I think we've all experienced they choose what you see. Like today, if you open Jason Ma's Facebook, it would be very different from your Facebook, right? Because Facebook, their algorithms chooses what you see, right? Amazon, they know exactly what you've bought, and they can predict what you're going to buy, right? Uh, and so. Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and they're all these 7 companies are more powerful than uh, all countries, right? Um, and that's why. Next page, please. Next one again. That's why people call data uh, the new oil, right? Um, and sorry, previous page. If you look at the most powerful companies in this world, like I would say if you look at it on the right side, this is data from 2008. All the most wealthy companies are either oil companies or banks, right? Exxon, Chevron, right? Chevron started in 1879, Exxon started 1870, right? In 2018, of course, this list has changed, but it's largely the same. Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. You know, um, data is the new oil. These are the new companies that maybe the may dominate for the next 50, 100 years if they continue to own everyone's data, right? Next page. Next page. And so the most powerful forces in the history of humankind are being challenged, and there's deep denial. Um, sorry, next page. And the point is that all these technologies points towards tyranny, right? This is an article written by Yuval Harari. I think many of us know him as, he's one of the best-selling authors who wrote books like *Sapiens*, *Homo Deus*, and he's maybe the most sought after speaker in forums like the World Economic Forum, um, and he talks about how these big data companies, right, um, own all of our data, and they're able to track and some people call these companies, or some people call America, surveillance capitalism, right? Um, next page. And this is just an image where I find quite um, mocking. It's Mark Zuckerberg walking into a conference, where everybody is wearing a Oculus headset, staring into the virtual world, and he walks in smirking. I find this a very uh, telling and ironic image because he obviously is the new Caesar of our world because Facebook owns, I don't know what's the percentage, but they are so powerful in terms of being able to predict. They own people's social graph. meaning they know who your friends are. The next 2 pages is just what some documentaries on Netflix, The Great Hack and The Social Dilemma. These are 2 very popular Netflix shows. They just talk about the societal effects of Facebook, right? How it affected the 2016 election, and you know, I think Facebook sometimes gets an unfair um, um, analysis too, but it's hard to deny how powerful they are in terms of deciding what you can see, what you view, and how their algorithms are really able to manipulate people into things they might not want to become. Right. Next page. And just to quickly summarize, right? Web 2, all the companies we just talked about, the GAFA, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent. The reason why they say it's only read and write and no owning of digital assets is because these few companies own the digital assets, right? And Web3 really is a rebellion against this Web 2 dominance of people's digital assets, right? And so the next page. And so this is the context in which Bitcoin came in, right? Bitcoin started out as a rebellion or kind of, this the Times article, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. This article was quoted or locked into the first Bitcoin blockchain. When Bitcoin first released in January of 2009, it attached this article, right? And so clearly Bitcoin was responding to, first world countries bailing out the banks, right? And if you really followed what happened, it's the poorest, the poor suffered the most, right? I remember having this conversation with Bishop N.T. Wright, and he was lobbying, for example, for the IMF and different financial institutions to forgive the debts of African countries or poor people, and they've always said no, basically. But when 2008 came, they quickly bailed out the banks, right? And so, long story short, it's the rich did for the rich what they wouldn't do for the poor, right? The rich bailed out the rich banks, what they weren't willing to bail out poorer countries or poorer people, right? And Bitcoin was a reaction to that, right? And then Web3 is built on that Bitcoin kind of ethos, right? Bitcoin saw the corruption of the banks and central institutions, hence this whole conversation around decentralization. It sees the corruption of central banks, central power, states that control money supply, for example. And then, the Bitcoin started 2008, 2009, and then Ethereum started, I think, 2014, 15. And that started the Web3 movement. And that was the beginning. Bitcoin started this idea of a digital asset, right? Can you go to the next page real quick? And so, just quickly, what a very clear example of why Bitcoin was so different and why it really was the genesis of a digital asset is because I think on the left side you see iTunes. I think we're all familiar with what an MP3 music file is, right? And what today, if you were to share this piece of music, say you are you were sharing a Hillsong piece of music. When I share it to Jason, for example, he can have a copy of that song, right, King of Kings, and I can have that same piece of music, right, and we both have it, right. And so the internet became this giant copy machine, right? It's able to copy anything, any picture, any file, any music file, any document, right? Any piece of music, right? And Bitcoin came along, and they solved that idea of a double spend, right? With Bitcoin, what you're able to do is, if I have a Bitcoin and I send it to Jason, I no longer have that Bitcoin, right? Jason has that Bitcoin. And hence you're not able to copy it, right? Because if you're able to copy it, then it would be just massive inflation, right? There would be an infinite number of Bitcoin, and then it would be worthless, right? And so that is the meaning, or that is the beginning of this idea of a digital asset or digital property, right? I think today the SEC is they haven't made this announcement, but it's clear to me that Gary Gensler is going to rule Bitcoin as a digital asset, which is basically digital property, right? It's very much like property. It's not a currency, right? And so, technically speaking, Bitcoin is not a cryptocurrency; it's a crypto asset. Can we go to the previous page? And this previous page, sums up a lot of this conversation around crypto and big data. The thing we didn't talk about is um, when we talk about data, the reason why it's so powerful is because of artificial intelligence, right? And what really defines artificial intelligence today, a good AI company. For example, when I was at Horizons, we invested in a company called DeepMind, which is got acquired by Google. And this company was the company that built the AlphaGo uh, computer bot, basically, that beat the world Go champion in Korea. Um, and what really separates, artificial intelligence companies is really not the technology or the algorithm anymore. It's just how much data you have to train these deep learning algorithms, right? And so the more data you have, such as Google or Facebook, the better your AI systems have, right? Because these AI systems are trained to learn from your data, right? And so this conversation, which is like, these are both, one is Peter Thiel, one is Reid Hoffman. They're both very well-known Silicon Valley venture capitalists. They take very different views of what crypto is and what AI is, right? Um, on the right side, you see Peter Thiel. He says crypto is libertarian, and AI is communist. And what he means by that is AI is communist, meaning, for example, in China, right? China, um, the government has the ability to of surveillance of all of their citizens, right? They have the ability to, you know your credit history, to your social standing. Um, they have all the data on, everything from your search to what you buy. And so that's why, and for Peter Thiel, AI is communist, right? And for Reid, uh, his interpretation is AI is rule of law, right? Only with these AI technology are we able to sniff out the terrorists or the bad people, for example, right? Um, and crypto, like I said, it's a rebellion, against centralized power, which is why Peter would say crypto was libertarian, right? And Reid Hoffman would say crypto was anarchy, right? because if everybody owns their own data, if anybody can build their own currency, for example, right? If like what we're seeing today in Web3, everybody can start building their community and get everybody behind it and start their own currency, it becomes anarchy, right? It becomes, and then if these basically cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin become a community, they have their own myth and storytelling. They have their own ethics and code and rule of law. Then anything will go, right? And next pages. Next. Here we kind of talked about. So here's just a review of, now you have an understanding of what a digital asset is, right? And people are valuing these digital assets more than physical assets. And, here I'm ready to define what metaverse and Web3 is, right? Like, Mark defines the metaverse as internet plus something, but really, I think the best definition that helps us understand both the metaverse and Web3 is the metaverse and Web3 is not really a virtual space or the internet plus. The best way to think about it is that it's a point in time. It's a point in time where people value digital assets more than physical assets. I want to repeat that. The metaverse is really a point in time where people value digital assets more than physical assets. And you can actually expound that, right? You can say, and maybe this will frighten a lot of people here, is the metaverse is also a point in time where people value digital relationships, value digital communities over physical communities and physical relationships, right? And I think in many ways it's starting to happen. We can see many communities. You can see in one of my previous pages, you can see people you can see people spending so much more time on Fortnite or Roblox rather than going to a physical basketball game, right? These esports communities are getting bigger and bigger than any other professional sports. Okay, I'm almost done. Next page. And this gets to why Bitcoin is. It really came out of nowhere, right? This person named Satoshi Nakamoto, they called it Immaculate Conception because it really came out of nowhere. He dropped this white paper, and the reason today why it's called a crypto asset is because there's no founder, right? The Bitcoin has these features of being open, borderless, permissionless, decentralized. And the reason why the SEC or Gary Gensler calls it a digital asset is because there's no one person, they can't find the CEO. There's no CEO of Bitcoin, right? Which is also why it's so powerful, right? The next page, please. And people are comparing, at least what they call Bitcoin maximalists. The Bitcoin maximalists are people who only believe in Bitcoin. They don't believe in Ethereum or any other cryptocurrency or any of the other cryptocurrencies. They're comparing the Bitcoin kind of revolution to the Gutenberg revolution, right? And what they're really comparing, what we saw in the Gutenberg press was, and the result of that was the separation of church and state, right? And they're saying that now is the first time where the states, who were always together with the central banks, they were their ability to find what money was and control the money and the supply, the creditor and the debtors, right? Like 2008, the central bank was able to just wipe out all the debt of the big banks, right? They had a control over that, right? And so when Bitcoin came out, it's the first time where it started out as a currency or a digital asset, but it's not controlled by the state. It's controlled by anybody that has a computer that's able to mine this Bitcoin. And so um, there's a lot of things that will unravel once you unravel the separation of state and money. We may not have time to talk about it today, but I think you can start thinking about, okay, when the state loses power over its people with defining what money is, that's where a lot of the innovation in the Web3 space and all the energy, you might hear terms like decentralized finance, DeFi, you might hear words like NFTs, ICOs. These are all attempts to define their own currency. And when you do that, and when you have many people start speculating about what's valuable, right? When we spend so much time and energy in this digital space, then it's just a supply and demand question, right? When we value, for example, a Fortnite skin, then that's valuable, right? The physical asset starts to not be as valuable, right? When so much time and energy and people put into Bitcoin, it takes away from the value of something else, right? Next page. And here, this is kind of, maybe I should start with the next page first. On the left is Bitcoin, on the right is Dogecoin. I don't know, maybe many of you have heard about this other cryptocurrencies. It's also top 10 cryptocurrency that was, Elon Musk was a big proponent of it. And here's an example of why these cryptocurrencies are actually worldviews, right? And when people ask me like what Dogecoin is versus Bitcoin, right? Can you go to the previous page again? It really is how you view the world. Like Dogecoin came out because they saw the Bitcoin and the Ethereum community as, taking themselves too seriously, right? Bitcoin launched, like I said, as a reaction to the financial crisis. And so the followers of Bitcoin basically see this world as a tragedy, right? And so on the left side, I'm using a Shakespearean tragedy. And on the right side, it's a Shakespearean comedy, right? And that's what the Dogecoin is. The Dogecoin came out as a meme. It came out as it's a community that was making fun of the Bitcoin community, right? And it's a community that's pokes fun at these crypto maximalists that take themselves too seriously about tragic events about the world. And so the Dogecoin crowd represents the people that see the world as a comedy. And so, and if you follow, their tweets or their discords, the community has that ethos, right? The Bitcoin maximalists, if you interact with that community, they're very, very libertarian, somewhat they're all kind of, a lot of them are anarchists, right? They're all anti-institutional. And the Dogecoin ones are, they love posting jokes, right? It's a much more lighthearted community, right? When Elon Musk posts about it, like there's a huge army of, people that see the world this way, and they go to support it, right? And but that's just to explain that, these are worldviews. Like every one of these Web3 communities, they're very mission driven. They have their origin story. They have their meta narrative. And they do have their belief system. If these people, and they're mostly kids, 30 and under, they're not going to churches, right? They're not having that type of reaction. They're spending all of their time, in the metaverse, whether it's on Fortnite or Roblox. In the Web3 space, they're spending time on Discord, on tweets. And that's what the internet was so good at. It was so good at getting people together and building community, quote community, right? Finding like-minded people that they identified with, right? Next page. Next. Oh, this page is just to explain this, on the left side, the separation of church and state, and on the right side, the separation of state and money. And the last idea I want to conclude with on the next page, you see, in the 90s, I spent a lot of my career in Silicon Valley. You were able to start your own company. And Facebook, when it came, what it was so good at, it's not just Facebook, but WhatsApp and, Discord today, Twitter. You're able to start your own community. And what Bitcoin did was be able to start your own currency. And when you do that, and when you start your own origin story and your own myth, you can really see them as people starting their own ethos and starting their own religion. And then I think what you'll see today, when you start separating state and money, a lot of people in the crypto space, if you know this space well, they're able to convince mayors to, give them certain perks for their community. And hence, in America, there are different crypto hubs like Miami, like Austin. The mayor of Miami can tweet something, to Elon and says, "Hey, if I give you this, then why don't you bring your company or your crypto team to Miami, and we'll give you these certain incentives," right? And so you can start seeing these crypto communities being able to having the power, and by voting with their feet, right, to go to places, to move to places that are more crypto friendly, right, that have that regulatory power to give these, so-called crypto anarchists what they want, right, and to live how they want to live. And so I think in our lifetimes, you'll see, this crypto community be able to, in some sense, start your own country, right? They can start convincing governments and convincing mayors and convincing sovereignties to give them what they want. And so I'm going to end my talk here. Next page, and maybe we should go into questions or comments, any feedback.
Thank you, Phil. That was a lot of information, and some of you are going, oh, that's really over my head. But I want to say something. We've got to learn this stuff. We need to know what is going on. And even if you're not going to invest in crypto, you need to know about it. We need to be conversant. And this whole day has been tailored to business people. All right, this is why we're speaking in these terms. And so what we felt, why we wanted to show what we just showed, was it gives you the foundation. It gives you the understanding. And then we're going to bring Phil back again. We're going to have Jason, that you heard from earlier, is going to do a little intro for him. He is such an innovator. I mean, this guy has I think he's working on something called an Exodus maybe they said that earlier. Exodus is where your all of your information doesn't, every keystroke is not captured. It's pretty incredible. So we're going to bring him on, then we're going to have a panelist, and then yours truly is going to come on later. We're going to have a little bit of worship. So, take a breath. Come on, we can do this. And we're going to just be saturated with God's presence in a minute. And then God is going to give us more information so we know what to do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Ma, and I am really, really happy to be back hosting Out of the Box once again in 2023 with some dear friends that were on Out of the Box last year. And I'm bringing them back this year by popular demand. And the first guest who will be discussing with us the biblical premise and a messianic view on the metaverse, on Web3, and the future of technology. He's one of my best friends in the whole world. I've done multiple companies with him, and he's been on the board of 3 of my companies, East West Ventures, 88 Rising, as well as now EST Media. But more importantly, Phil is just one of the most amazing human beings in the world, one of the most wise and intelligent, and truly a futurist in technology and what I would call modern day missions. So Phil, let me just read his bio. He's a senior advisor at Race Capital, a serial entrepreneur and investor. Prior, Phil was the founder of HTC Vive, the leading virtual reality headset, Exodus, which is the world's first crypto hardware phone, Alex e-reader, acquired by Barnes & Noble, which then became the Nook, partner at Horizon Ventures, and led numerous investments, including Improbable, valued at $2 billion, Beats, acquired by Apple for $3 billion, Sandbox VR, now valued at almost $500 million, and most recently Scopely, a gaming company that's gone public at over $3 billion. Phil joined HTC High-Tech Computer late 2007 and shipped the world's first Android phone and helped grow HTC from a USD $2 billion company to over $35 billion market cap company. Phil's a proud Taiwanese entrepreneur and received his bachelor and BS in mathematics and physics from UCSD, and more importantly, his MDiv from Fuller Theological Seminary. He's a happy husband of Tanya and proud father of Miles, Naomi, and Olive. Phil previously invested in numerous companies, but also founded the first VR, AR, what we call XR venture capital firm called Presence Capital. And so he invested into several computer vision companies such as Estra Reality and 6D.ai, acquired by Niantic, Loom.ai, acquired by Roblox, Blue Vision Labs, acquired by Lyft, the ride-sharing company, and Atomic Labs, acquired by Google. At Horizon Ventures, he led many deep tech and AI-related deals and served as a board member for over 10-plus companies globally, from Israel, London, to San Francisco. He's also featured in the best-selling innovation books In the History of the Future by Blake Harris and Non-BS Innovation by David Rowan, also featured investor on The Information, Engadget, Business Insider, CNBC, and many, many, many more. As you can tell, Phil is more than accomplished. More than that, he truly loves Christ, is a follower of the Holy Spirit, and truly is what I call a modern day priest, king, and prophetic technological prophet. He's one of a kind. Everyone welcome my dear friend, Phil Chen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. You have already met Phil Chen, and we are incredibly grateful and honored that he is going to come back and join us for a Q&A portion because he wasn't able to join us earlier with the other group. So the good thing is we get to focus totally on crypto and get to ask the questions that you guys have sent in.
And I have another question for him on the CBDCs that are coming, because that's actually new. I mean, it's been on the horizon, Phil, for a while to have these central bank digital currencies, but the questions will be like, okay, are they going to try to take over Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or what? So let's just go with the first question, though.
Okay, you are what we call a futurist who has a kingdom assignment in the marketplace in a leading technological area that will be significantly impacting lives in an increasing way in the coming days. There might be tough economic times coming. What do believers need to know to help them take advantage of these new technologies to prosper in the coming days? It's a big question.
What do they need to know? Yeah, I think in general, just to understand the technologies, and in this case, crypto. Well, I do want to say first that crypto is not just short for cryptocurrency. The original idea was it's actually short for cryptography, and cryptocurrency was actually using cryptography to secure. It was a technology used to secure, the value of cryptocurrency. And so, yeah, I would say understanding cryptocurrency. I would also just say, from a kingdom perspective, especially where Jesus talks, it's the number one thing he talks about, which is money and greed, and to really think deeply about what money is. Of course, the economists define it as three things like medium of exchange, unit of accounts, a store of value. But I think I can point the group to some books that really are thinking much more deeply about money, about debt, and how that's connected to sin, right? I'm always reminded that in the Lord's Prayer, there are different versions, right? It says, "Forgive us for our debts," forgive us, and sometimes if you think about it, our there's a deep connection between debt and sin,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people think about money and they think about debt, debt as maybe a human tool that, or some people see debt as stealing, right? As borrowing from the future or borrowing, from the young or something. And so I would encourage the church to really think and pray deeply about what money is, what debt is, and how much control it really has on our lives, to the way our churches are funded, to the way we think about our daily decisions, and really, at the end of the day, we want to put it on the altar and give it to God, and really think deeply and pray hard about what we're doing to be faithful in these challenging times. So I would say it's not so much. I mean, the economic challenges are obvious, but I think the spiritual and the faithfulness part of it is even more challenging.
So good, Phil. Why is Bitcoin special?
It's special because, it's special. It's as special as, in the Protestant Reformation, we saw the separation of church and state. And depending, of course, this could be a political discussion, but depending how much you trust when power is centralized to a human being or a lineage of human beings, right? I think the church at that time became a very centralized power, right? And I think one of the main ideas around separating church and state is to separate that power, is not to mix religion with politics.
Yes.
What fiat currency is government, central banks, what they define when they define money, it really is marrying state and money, right? Because the state gets to decide, and I mean the state literally produces money, right? They can print money, they control inflation, they control interest rates, right? The unique thing about Bitcoin is, and I would say it's the central tenet and assumption of Bitcoin, and what makes it so unique is it challenges that fiat money assumption, right? That state money defines money. And so the central idea around Bitcoin is the separation of state and money, right? Whereas fiat is the marrying of state and money. Bitcoin is unique because it's the first time that it's challenging the centralized power of defining what money is. And Bitcoin says, no, the money should be more about the people and the people in the community that help drive the value of this money. And so, yeah, I would say that's the central, from a historic, like a church, even from a church history perspective, why Bitcoin is so unique and so provocative, right? And it's so polarizing.
Yes.
And so some will love, there are believers who are so married to, and it all comes down to their understanding, which is why in the beginning, understanding of money, which is why in the beginning, I urge the church to really think deeply and pray hard about what Jesus says about money and greed.
Yes.
And what that does to our community. And so Bitcoin is very much a religion, right? The people, I mean, there's a term called Bitcoin maximalists. These are basically the core apostles or prophets or, the church that believe in Bitcoin and what it can change in their society. So they have a vision of how Bitcoin will help society, will change communities, will end corruption. It really is an all encompassing kind of philosophy and way of life. So yeah, those are some reasons, but I think the main thing that makes Bitcoin unique is challenging the centralized power of state and money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have seen, I know in my lifetime, greater and greater centralization of power, of global power, of institutions being created like the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and there is a push for even greater centralization, to where there will be, for example, like a global digital coin and or currency. I mean, already the United States is looking very seriously right now at doing a central bank digital currency. Other nations are doing central bank digital currency, whereas you have countries like El Salvador that are accepting cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin. And the concern with fiat money is that it robs future generations. In other words, from the time that we went off a gold standard where there was an asset backing the paper dollar and currency that you have, at the time that was done, when Richard Nixon, the dollar was worth $1. Today, that same dollar is worth 13.8 cents.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when you devalue your currency, that is stealing from people.
That's good.
That's
and not
right.
only that, with the United States being the one that basically has the main currency that things are settled in globally, we've robbed from the world. And so you can see why there would be a new creative way to get things back on track, to where a dollar is a dollar or a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin, and it's limited, and the people can have a confidence in money once again.
Yeah.
I'm so encouraged to hear that, hear you say that, because it's so critical to really understand. When you said 1971, when we went off the gold standard, that is such a critical, important history for, I think, the church to really understand. And that's such a huge point in understanding what money and debt is. And once you understand that, you're on your way. You're on more than half the way to understand what Bitcoin is. So yeah, thank you for that's of such critical importance. And CBDC, it's centralized, right? Banking, digital currency. I mean, that's exactly what it means. And I think the China I think a quick way to understand it is the Chinese version is basically 1984, right? It's mass surveillance. And then, some people might say the CBDC in the West is Brave New World, right? Both very dystopian views of what, a centralized, defined money system can incur on a community and people. And so I loved when you mentioned El Salvador, but so what you're going to see, I think, is the first world countries, the big powers, they're going to be defining their own CBDC, but then the emerging and the third world country are going to embrace Bitcoin, right? And because they're the marginalized community, they're the marginalized nations, they don't have, the power to steal future generations from a World Bank or an IMF, right? And so, I think the church needs to be very wary of CBDCs and to really understand, especially in America, understand the privilege that we are in,
Yes.
but also understand the effects of our decisions and our support. And I think Bitcoin, to me, Bitcoin is that voice in the wilderness, right? It's that voice calling out in the wilderness, claiming that, first world countries, the way they define money, the way they lend or borrow or use debt or interest rates or inflation is robbing the weaker and the poor, right? And that really is an abstract. It may sound abstract, but if you really pray and think hard about it, it is not taking care of the weak and the poor that we're supposed to. So back to the first question, it's again, it's how to be more faithful and spiritual about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and CBDCs. That's I think of utmost importance for the church.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
and it's interesting, Phil. You draw a distinction between the CBDC that the United States is looking at and what China is already doing, but we're only one step away from the surveillance that China is doing. I mean, there have been policies that had been floated recently where they want to track anything that happens that's over $600, and that is not something that is going to be used to do what the liberals want to do is make sure that the top 1%, pay their fair share. You always hear this statement: they must pay their fair share, but we're not going to do anything that's going to hurt the middle class. But that would be devastating to the middle class. Just policies like that. So, to trust a government that can then begin to do things like they're doing in social media, they will cancel you, they will shut you down. In Canada, during the trucker strike, they began to shut people's bank accounts that were supporting policies that were against the policies of the government. This is where the world is moving, particularly the United States. China's already done it. They've kind of laid out a path for this. This is incredibly dangerous for the body of Christ because Christianity is being assailed all over the world. If you just look how Christianity is being treated in China, that's coming. And so combined with that, and this is probably getting a little preachy, but in the United States at least, there's still a chance to do something because the Christians of the nation, if they would begin to steward government, you would begin to see fiscal policies that become more in alignment with the Word of God.
Yeah. Speaking of when you guys were speaking about China, we have a question. What are your thoughts in China wooing crypto platforms in Hong Kong?
What was the question? Can you repeat that?
What are your thoughts in China wooing crypto platforms in Hong Kong?
I don't know that that's a concerted effort, but I think what's happening is it is a great, especially if we're talking about more centralized crypto platforms, right? There is a big distinction that people need to understand, that there are crypto platforms that are more centralized and some that are more decentralized. And so if you're luring all the centralized, crypto platforms to Hong Kong, it's a great tool of, a great opportunity for the government and surveillance, right? Now you can track, the financial flow of cryptocurrencies from people all over the world, right? In a centralized way. And so, yeah, I would say that, I guess a more cynical view of why and if that is happening, that probably is one huge motivation.
Wow. You guys are giving us some heavy things to think about.
Oh yeah, you figure given China's track record, if they got the ability to have unbridled surveillance of global finance, and economically they're growing into a stronger, more forceful power in the world, it could be very dangerous, couldn't it?
Yeah, it's very dangerous. Yeah, I would say, but it's also done in the name of security, right? The gospel that the government preaches, oh, we're here to keep you safe. But they're also looking for, do you agree with me, right? Are you part of the party? Are you doing anything to jeopardize our agenda, right? So it's their PR and marketing is we're keeping you safe, but these tools are so capable of being so invasive of our privacy and our sovereignty. That's why crypto is, as the world becomes, all of our time and attention and is spent more in the digital world, that digital world becomes more and more important. There's more and more incentive to control those digital systems, right? And we've seen that already. I mean, even outside of crypto, we see so much havoc that social media platforms can wreak, from documentaries like The Social Dilemma or The Great Hack, right? And if you pair that with, okay, now not only can I manipulate and see everything that you're saying, but now I can manipulate and see or even cancel all the money that you have, how you're spending it, then now you just have too much control over somebody's privacy, and it's a complete demolishing of the sovereignty of an individual, privacy and sovereignty. So I do think at the end of the day, it comes down to that is the sovereignty of the individual. And I think it's very clear that the Bible is in support of sovereignty and the dignity of every single individual. And CBDCs and centralizing crypto platforms, and mass surveillance are pretty antithetical to those biblical principles.
I think that gives the church a direction to pray as well. Now, this question, we said earlier, and you didn't hear, that when we're asking you guys these questions, we're just asking for your opinion, and we understand that you're not giving us financial advice. But Bitcoin versus gold, if you can only pick one over the next 10 years, which one would you choose?
For me, it's Bitcoin because the rules are clear. I think, gold, you continue to mine gold, right? And I think it increases by 2% every year. So basically, you're just saying you're losing value by 2%. So that is the type of inflation. Bitcoin is clear. The rules are so clear, right? It's already set, and you can audit it. And so there is no monkeying around that, right? It is a system. It's an algorithm that very transparently shows this is how much is going to be mined and at what time, right? And at when.
Right.
Whereas gold, if one day, some government, finds a huge pot, literally a pot of gold, that can completely flood the market and inflate, or they want to control demand,
Right.
It's much more prone to bad behavior, right? And I think that's one of the weaknesses. But, I do think gold is still quite a steady, but if I had to choose one or the other, I would choose Bitcoin. But gold is a pretty good and close second to storing your value as well.
And the good thing is, you don't have to choose only one.
Yes,
In your
that's
portfolio,
true.
you can have a mixture of Bitcoin or crypto,
Absolutely.
gold, silver, and other things that actually are much more likely to retain their value than an highly inflatable fiat money.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are common scams in crypto and how can they be avoided?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. 1 second.
It's okay.
Sorry. Say that again.
What are common scams in crypto and how can they be avoided?
Common scams are just, the most common is just through social media. It's just social proof. It's people texting you, hey, this is the latest NFT or this is the latest crypto. And if you put money in, we'll give you, an insane amount of interest. And so that's usually where a lot of scams happen, when you're alone on the internet, and somebody very nice, or somebody that sounds like you can trust, texts you and makes you a very warm offer, right? I think those are the most common ways of getting scammed.
Yeah. What is DeFi and do you think it'll disrupt banking?
What is DeFi and what?
And do you think that it will disrupt modern banking?
Well, DeFi stands for decentralized finance, right? And Bitcoin is considered, a decentralized currency. But DeFi really is talking about decentralized exchanges, right? I think all the modern fiat exchanges is very centralized, and has many restrictions. Whereas in a decentralized exchange, you can basically trade with anyone without a license. It's permissionless, right? It's borderless.
Right.
And yeah, will it challenge centralized exchanges? I think it's pretty far off from that happening. And it's also prone to many different attacks and scams. I mean, there are good uses of centralized institutions, and I'm not saying centralized exchanges are good or bad, but I do think as a church we need to think about, what are the type of institutions and behavior that we want centralized and what ones we want more decentralized, right? Bitcoin is it attempts to be a decentralized monetary, system, but that doesn't, you can pair Bitcoin with, or a decentralized money system with a centralized exchange where you can trade Bitcoin with gold or Bitcoin with US dollars or Bitcoin with Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, an exchange is just a centralized order book that says, keeps track of who wants to trade with who. And a decentralized exchange doesn't keep track of who, you can trade with anyone as long as they agree.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One of the potential Democrat presidential candidates for 2024, has said that it would be one of her primary goals to get rid of or to attack the crypto systems in the United States. Is crypto under attack in America? And is it being viewed as such a threat to the centralized banking system that they feel they need to control it or even outlaw it?
Yeah, I would say it is being under attack, right?
Yeah.
Because it's, almost it's, Gary Gensler is and the SEC is going after, well, also because of Luna and FTX, namely. Yeah, it is under attack. It is seen as more of a security rather than a commodity or utility. But that's also a reason why Bitcoin is unique, because it's the only one. It's very tough to argue. It's almost impossible to argue that it's a security. Whereas all the others are, you can argue that it's a security, despite Ethereum is still relatively decentralized. And so, yeah, I would say that's why Bitcoin is still the one unique one. Ethereum is very unique still too, but there's still a debate around if it's a security or utility.
Is this debate happening elsewhere around the world, though, Phil? I mean, we kind of see what's going on in the United States of America. This actually will reach a lot of people around the world. And are there different places in the world that are viewing this whole thing with a different lens?
I would say yes. I mean, places like Switzerland views it differently. Obviously, the El Salvador and Turkey, different countries. But at the end of the day, U.S. they set the standard, right? They are the thought leaders, and so the world will follow. However the SEC decides in a major way. Although there are different views of it, and Singapore, for example, is more crypto friendly, and even in the U.S., I mean, America is not one thing, right? I mean, places like Miami and Wyoming, Texas are much more open to cryptocurrency and the like, and so, but it is threatening to centralize banks and fiat money, and so of course the powers that be that control those systems are attacking it. But on the city level or on the state level, it's encouraging to see different mayors embrace it, and that includes Miami, and it includes Montana, Wyoming, and so yeah, I those debates are happening globally, but also happening, state-wise on the state level, not just in centralized authorities like the SEC.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yes, this is our last question because I know we are taking up so much of your time. Thank you, Phil. When you were speaking about Luna and FTX, how do you position yourself risk management wise when you're investing?
The nature of my business in venture capital, it is high risk, high reward,
Right.
right? And so, you do the best with the information at hand. And so I'm not sure I have great advice in terms of how to avoid these, because also the nature of venture capital is also to fail, because you learn so much in failing that you're also the first to learn that lesson, and hence informs your next decision. And so I guess what I would say is, if in investing and avoiding is, if you do it as a profession, it's great, because failing and making mistakes is how you learn to make a next mistake. The problem is, if you're a casual investor and you only have a chance to make one or two investments, and those 1 or 2 investments happen to be high risk ones, and it fails, then then there's no next time, right? You have to, if you want to play the game, you have to play the game to be able to make mistakes and learn from it, and then win, right? Learn how to win. And so I guess that would be my advice. Like, if you want to take high risks, you would have to be smart about, like, you could take high risk, but amounts that you can afford, right? That you can afford to lose. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that answered your question, but
It does.
It's interesting. It's interesting, Phil, because Connie was saying the same thing. She says, "Look, I'm a venture capitalist. We're expected to hit home runs, not single, not a double, triple, and therefore we're expected to take more risk." She said, "Now, personally, I am much more risk averse than that, and so I'm much more cautious in the way that I invest." And so she drew the distinction between the technology that you're in and personal.
Yeah, and so exactly that. I mean, venture capital by definition is high risk, and my wife, who's a private wealth manager, she manages wealthy clients, and so she has to take a much more conservative role, right? And so, for example, for her, she doesn't touch anything in crypto, right? Because it is a high risk, right? She can't mess around, I guess. She can't afford to make mistakes and that type of mistakes. But yeah, and so there is a big distinction between high risk capital, venture capital, versus more steady public capital investing. Yeah.
Is there a way that the church could be praying for you and people in your industry?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot. I mean, it's all of the above that we just talked about. It's such a foundational, fundamental problem that we all face. Money touches every person,
right?
That it's unavoidable. How do we, as a community, together, try to be as faithful as possible in our when we're here on this earth?
Yes.
It is not easy, and so I would just pray for that. Is a deeper understanding of what debt and money is, and practical ways of how to be faithful to Jesus's warnings and teachings, because it is a real beautiful thing when you're able to do it, when you're able to make that balance. I pray for that.
Yes.
That's interesting, because what he's saying that he would like prayer for is the same thing the body of Christ needs. And it's one of the reasons we're having this out of the box.
Exactly.
Because the body of Christ needs to come up to speed on some of the new technologies. And one of the ones that he shared about today is cryptocurrency. We've talked about other aspects, and we will do that during the out of the box. We have done that. So, Phil, thank you so much for the wisdom that you brought to the table, and thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And I would encourage all of you who are watching this, keep these guys, what we call our futurists, keep them on your prayer radar, and cover them and cover their families in Jesus' name.
Absolutely.
Phil, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
I want to welcome you to our evening session of Out of the Box. This has been an incredible day, something for everybody. I know some of you, may have listened to some of this on cryptocurrency, and it's just like went right over your head. But I just encourage you, if you can, to listen. Especially, we're going to have some panelists tonight. We're going to have venture capitalists and people that are outstanding standing in their field. They are pioneers, they're forerunners. And then, we're going to have yours truly there. I'm going to be prophesying. I'll do a rap. And so you don't want to miss it. I don't want to miss it. It's going to be so good. And all through the day, we've just had wonderful worship. And so we want to welcome back Gabriel Allred and the worship team from Trinity Church, Cedar Hill, Texas. We're so thankful. Listen, get ready. Get ready. I mean, whether, you want to stand and worship or just soak in the worship, sometimes it's good just to soak, but just get in the presence of the Lord. Let him wash away the cares of the day. Let him wash away your fears of the future. And just let's get in the Spirit. And God bless you.